Hey, folks, welcome back. We are on to the second day of personality. So, we talked about our friend Freud with the psychoanalytic theory. He's a pretty weird dude, right? So, now we're going to talk about the neo Freudians today, who are the people who agreed with some stuff that he had to say, but mainly kind of diverted from him and made their own paths as well. So, going off again, psychoanalytics, solely Freud. Today we're talking about psychodynamic, which are the people like Jung, Adler, and Horney, who made his stuff more modern and took some of the core of the Freudian beliefs and then adapted them kind of to make them more scientific and make them their own. And then we're also going to touch on the humanistic theory of personality, which of course talks about our friend Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, and then also our buddy Carl Rogers. So to get started, let's just pick up again with Freud's theory and then just the issues that exist with that. So we said multiple times yesterday that it's not very scientific and there's not a lot of empirical evidence with experiments and things that really prove that. And it's not very testable. And of course, as we saw, he's a weird dude. He focused too much on sex and childhood and not enough on kind of the other things that could go on at other points in our lives beyond our childhood that could still impact our personality. And a lot of these issues come up with that his research that he was doing was mainly on people who had kind of intense psychological disorders. So this is kind of some sampling bias, right? So it could explain why they're acting in a way that's abnormal, but for the typical person that he's not researching, there could be different explanations for that. So some sampling bias and how he was going about it as well, for sure. Now we're going to look at our neo-Freudians, who were kind of Freud's disciples in a way, but many of them agreed with some of the core values that he had, like the unconscious, but then kind of went off and did their own, went in their own direction. So they agreed with this idea of the unconscious and that there are some things that maybe we aren't aware of that are driving our behavior and our personality, but they think there's a lot more with our conscious mind that's at play than what Freud's letting off. So they do believe there's an unconscious, but they think there's a lot more going on that we are aware of in our conscious understanding. And they also believe that there was more social motivations and cultural things rather than sexual and aggressive behaviors that are motivating our behavior. So again, they're just agreeing it's not all these repressed sexual agitations, but there's more social and normal kind of motivations that are driving our behavior and personalities. So one of the famous neo-Freudians, who's actually one of Freud's most promising students, they were besties, was Carl Jung. So he was really, he was like Freud's protege. But he ends up breaking away and kind of doing his own thing and disagreeing with a lot of what Freud had to say. So what Jung does agree with Freud about is this thing called the personal unconscious. And this is very similar to what Freud sees as the unconscious and the id, these repressed kind of needs that we want to satisfy. So Jung does see there being this personal unconscious that is driving our behavior, but he also thinks of something called the collective unconscious. So this is one of his most famous contributions, is his identifying of this collective unconscious. So we don't know if this is completely true, but it's a really interesting concept. So he says that there's this collective unconscious, which is where our shared memory traces exist from our previous species history. So he's saying there's these things that through evolution and passing down of these traits, that all humans have these. So kind of shared memory traces that are existing in our collective unconscious that all humans have. And what's inside the collective unconscious, so these shared things are called archetypes. So these are emotionally charged images that have universal meaning. So think of things that we all in like every culture we see. So whether you are in like like Native American culture, African culture, European, Western culture, whatever, every culture is going to have some kind of archetype. It might not be the exact same kind of way it's presented, but it's the same base idea. So an example would be like a mother, a father figure. Every culture has these. We talk about hero, villain. These are things that you see across every culture. They might look a little different, but they're these figures that reappear throughout history in every culture. So he's saying that because there's these universal images that pop up, we have these archetypes that are in the collective unconscious, and these are being passed down throughout human history. And that's why they're appearing throughout every culture, throughout everything that you see in history. What I want you to do is go ahead, draw a picture of a mother, and draw a picture of a hero. So this will make sense in a sec. So do that real quick. So you'll see here, right, we have this archetype of a mother, whether it's Mother Nature, whether it's our own moms, and whether it's kind of our prototype of a mom, right? And then we have same thing. We have the archetype of a hero. So this is someone who's saving the day, right? So it's kind of the same idea, but it might differ in different cultures. So maybe in our American culture, we think of the Avengers, we think of Marvel, whatever. So we think of superheroes like that, but maybe in past cultures, it was like a knight or someone else who was coming to save the day. So we all have this archetype of hero. It's just different in how it's presenting ourselves. So again, Jung says that we all have this collective unconscious in which these archetypes are passed down through generations, that all humans share this. Another example of archetypes that I think is interesting would be the magician. So you have like Gandalf here, right? So maybe our culture's version. But then you also have other magicians throughout history. You have like sorcerers appearing in different culture, witchcraft, whatever. Another example, again, connected to this would be like the trickster. That's kind of another version of this magician. So I have a friend actually who did really interesting research on trickster rabbits appearing throughout different cultures. So a prominent one in African cultures would be the trickster rabbit. So this is like Brer Rabbit here. And then we also have in many Native American cultures, you have kind of the trickster coyote. So again, this archetype of a trickster or a magician who's kind of playing with you, this appears in different ways, but it's universal. Even though it's presenting itself and looks different, it's a universal phenomenon, a universal archetype. It's in everyone's collective unconscious. And then our next neo-Freudian is Alfred Adler. So one of the things that we hear of in psychology often is kind of the quintessential inferiority complex. So it's this idea that people have a basic sense of inadequacy or insecurity, feeling like they're not good enough. And this comes from feeling like physically or psychologically deficient, say as like a child. So maybe you were the scrawny little runt of a kid, and then now you have an inferiority complex, feeling like you're inadequate or never going to be good enough. So he says that our kind of goal and driving force in life is to conquer inferiority and feel kind of competent and superior. And then the other thing that he did is study birth order. So while this might not have the most scientific evidence, there is some probably truth to a lot of this birth order study, saying that firstborn kind of leaders, that kind of thing, middle might be a little bit more rebellious or whatever, trying to get attention and that kind of a thing. So interesting stuff there is with what Adler's doing. And then we have Karen Horney. So she is the woman, the feminist voice in psychology. And like we talked about in the previous one, that she came up with this term of womb envy. So she was angry at Freud, saying, okay, yeah, you're saying girls have penis envy, but you know what? I think men have womb envy, and that they're jealous of woman's ability to have children that men don't have. And that's kind of what's having their attraction to women then. So she also comes up with these things called neurotic stages, which are pretty interesting. So there's 4 of them. And these also, you can see some of the Freudian aspects in them, that there's a lot to do with how you were raised as a child, influencing your personality later in life. So stage 1 is called moving towards people. So this is someone who's really a social person and really wants to be well liked and cares a lot about um, fitting in and being liked by others. So much to the point that maybe they're like giving away money and trying to like buy their friends and like get friends in that way. That's almost not healthy. And this comes from people who had a really socially isolated childhood. So maybe they didn't have a lot of friends, or their parents didn't give them love and warmth and support. So this is the result, is moving towards people. And then we have moving against others. So this is when you had a hostile family environment growing up. So maybe you were verbally, physically abused. You didn't come from a loving family. There was a lot of anger and tension and argument in your household. So then this would result in moving against others. So you don't like to be with other people. Maybe you have some aggression towards other people. So you are kind of acting out and being aggressive and negative towards other people. You're not getting along with others. Then we have the third one, moving away from people. So this is when you are too close to others in childhood. So maybe you were like smothered or something like that. So now you're going to move away from people and kind of isolate yourself and be a bit of a loner. And then fourth one, we have moving with people. So this is the positive. You had a balanced, positive childhood. Your parents did a good job. You had friends, positive interactions, and now you're going to move with people. So moving towards people, remember, was like too much. You're trying too hard to make friends. Or moving with people is a good balance. So you are socially competent, having a positive social life because you had this good, well-balanced childhood. Okay, so ways that the neo-Freudians would assess unconscious processes, so how they're determining your kind of personality, is by using projective tests. So this is a really important term to know. One of the things that AP wants us to know is the different assessments and tests that psychologists use to determine our personality. So these neo-Freudians in the psychodynamic perspective really like to use projective tests. So this is a personality test that in which there's kind of ambiguous stimuli, and then it's trying to trigger your unconscious response. So ambiguous stimuli triggering your unconscious response to it. So there's 2 examples of this, and you guys are going to get a chance to kind of mess around with both of these in your project. So we have the thematic apperception test, the TAT. So this is one in which there's an ambiguous picture, a photo, or some kind of like painting image. So it's some kind of scene, there's people in it typically, and then it asks you to write for like 10 minutes, make up a story that explains this picture. So again, it's an ambiguous picture. We don't really know what's going on in there. It's left up for interpretation, right? So you're coming up with a story to explain it. And the goal here is seeing, okay, well, your story is supposed to be representing what your unconscious desires are in some way. Then we have the Rorschach ink blot test. So we're going to make those in a sec. I'm going to have you guys do a DIY ink blot, create it yourself one. So Rorschach, these are just series of little black and white ink blots that are splotches on a page, and then you're trying to say what you see. So is it a butterfly? Is it a sexual image? Whatever you come up with could determine if you have a healthy, unhealthy personality and what your unconscious is trying to say. So I'll give us some examples real quick. So this is the thematic apperception test. So you'll see here, they're kind of ambiguous images. You don't really know what's going on here. There's lots of different interpretations. So they're going to have you write a story about it. And then what you say could be judged as healthy or unhealthy. So if you're saying something that's kind of inappropriate or dirty, then they'll say, oh, well, they have some kind of mental issues going on. But if it's something that makes sense, that they deem as okay, then they'll say you have a healthy personality or whatever. Then Rorschach ink blot. So again, just kind of splotches of ink on a page. My friend has a cat named Rorschach because he has a bunch of black spots all over. So Rorschach ink blot test. Your goal is to look at the image and say what you see. And depending on what you see, it could be something healthy. So maybe you're seeing a butterfly or whatever it is here. Or it could be something unhealthy. So here, if you're seeing like probably a butterfly, bird type thing, would be healthy. But if you're seeing sexual organs, then they're going to say, oh, you have a problem or something like that. So same thing here. Here's another one. So if you're seeing like a female face, they're going to say, okay, that's healthy. But if you're seeing sexual imagery, then they're going to say that's unhealthy. So these aren't used too often today because one issue is they're super duper subjective, right? What could be healthy for one person, their opinion of what's healthy might be different. So it's super subjective and there's not a whole lot of reliability or validity here. So they found that even trained raters evaluating the same patient come up with different interpretations. So people are having all sorts of different interpretations. There's not a lot of reliability or consistency in getting the same results time after time, or judging a person, their personality the same way each time. And there's not a lot of validity either. So oftentimes they're mixed diagnosing someone as being abnormal or having a mental disorder when they don't, when they're clearly fine, right? So even if someone's saying that they see something sexual, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have a mental disorder, right? So again, there's a lack of validity here, and that it's not, these are supposed to test whether or not you are healthy or unhealthy, and that's not testing that. The fact that so many people are getting misdiagnosed shows it's not really a valid test of mental health, largely because it's so subjective, right? Okay, so now on to the humanistic personality theories. So these guys are in direct contrast to what all the psychodynamics and Freudian people are saying. So they're tired of the negative focus of the psychodynamics on these psychological disorders and problems. So they're saying Freud, neo-Freudians, you guys are focusing way too much on the abnormal, on the negative, bad aspects of humanity. We need to throw that away and let's just focus on what's good. You guys are focusing on all these repressed, terrible things that are going on in your unconscious. Let's focus on what makes people good. And we believe that all people are naturally capable of being good. And we talked about Maslow, right? He says that it's just a matter of getting those needs met, and then you can all have that ability to reach your full potential. So humanistic, remember, it's the rainbows and unicorns. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I'll zip through that. We know what it is. Maslow is saying, again, that mental health isn't just the absence of a mental illness. He's saying it's much more. And that's why he created this hierarchy, is because he's looking for the ingredients of a healthy personality. And he's looking at people who are really successful and living full and productive lives. So he's trying to see what are they doing right? What's making them so successful and happy? What are the ingredients to this? And this is where he comes up with his hierarchy of needs. He says, wow, look at all these people who are being thriving and happy and successful. Well, I interviewed them and it looks like their physiological needs are met. They have safety needs. They feel loved. They have a positive self-esteem about themselves, and they are living their best lives, and therefore they self-actualize. They're reaching their goals. So Carl Rogers, he's the other important humanistic psychologist that we need to know. So big thing with him that's easy to remember is you can think humanistic, rainbows and unicorns, all about positivity. And Carl Rogers, you can think Mr. Rogers, the most positive, unconditional, loving, positive regarding person out there. I hope you guys still remember Mr. Rogers because I remember him as a kid. So Carl Rogers, he a couple contributions he did is he came up with this idea of person-centered therapy. So instead of Freud, where he's really trying to drive the therapy session with his clients and trying to get them almost to the point where he's pushing out these confessions of like abuse and things like that in childhood, he's saying, let's let the person drive their therapy session and make it all about what they need and what they want. So let them kind of direct what they need. So he said that a part of person-centered therapy requires that you're in a positive environment to grow. So just like Maslow said, you need these different things to grow and be yourself. He's kind of saying in a therapy session and in life, you need a positive environment to grow as a person. So 3 things that you need for this would be genuineness, acceptance, and the big thing here with acceptance is his term called unconditional positive regard. So this is that like parents need to give their children unconditional love. That I love you no matter what, whatever happens, thick and thin, I love you no matter what. And I remember my mom used to read me this little book as a child called No Matter What, and it's all about whatever happens, I love you because I'm a parent and you are my son or daughter, and I'm going to love you till the end of time, no matter what. So he said that with this acceptance that parents need to give to their children and that therapists need to give their clients. So if you are a therapist in the humanistic perspective, he said that no matter what, you could be confessing these terrible things that you're doing. This is a no judgment zone, and that I'm going to accept you and work with you and believe in you no matter what you're saying, and we can grow. So then, third ingredient is empathy. So empathy is, again, understanding what others are going through. That seeing, we had the freshman raccoon prep, if you're a leader for that. We looked at putting on the sunglasses, your perspectacles. And empathy is seeing yourself through someone else's shoes. So gaining that perspective and understanding of what someone else is going through. So these are the keys to that positive environment for growth that Carl Rogers is talking about in person-centered therapy. So unconditional positive regard, big thing to remember with him. And he also came up with this term called the self-concept. So before I get into that, it's important to talk about what the self is in psychology. So the self is just what psychologists see as the center, the core of our being. It's like the center of our personality. So it's what guides our thoughts, feelings, and actions. It's kind of the center of who we are as people, our souls, essentially, right? So what Roger says is that there's this thing called our self-concept. And this is like our overarching view of ourself. So when you ask yourself, who am I? This is your self-concept. It's how you view yourself, like how you see yourself in the world and who you are. So humanists believe that having a positive self-concept is the key to a healthy personality. So if we can get you these things by getting your needs met, by having this unconditional positive regard, then you're gonna get there. So the building blocks of our self-concept come from 2 things. We have self-esteem, which is your feeling of high or low self-worth. So do you have a positive view of yourself or a negative view? And then self-efficacy. So your feeling of competence and effectiveness. So competence is a big word that comes up. We saw that that's kind of in your esteem needs for Maslow. So this is just your feeling that you are contributing, that you can do things, that you are like a contributing member to society, and that you're an effective person. So these 2 things are what build and kind of form your self-concept. All right. So main things here, just to recap for today. We have the psychodynamic perspective with our neo-Freudians who agree with some of Freud's, but do kind of differ in important ways with things like collective unconscious with Jung, things like Adler's inferiority complex, And then knowing the projective tests and these types that the neo-Freudians and the psychodynamic perspective use is very important. I'd say biggest thing today would be understanding what a projective test is, and then TAT and Rorschach, and you're going to be taking those in your little personality project. And then for our humanist friends, knowing Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you've seen this reappear a million times, so you guys should know these. You should know what the different levels are and what they mean. And then for Rogers, knowing unconditional positive regard and what self-concept is very important. All right, so we did it. Your homework tonight is going to be creating your DIY Rorschach ink blots. So I'll, in a sec, direct us on how to do those. I'm a little off-brand Martha Stewart for you. So you can do that, and then you can just continue on with that personality project. So complete the Myers-Briggs typology inventory. These are probably the most famous psychological tests that we know, that we often hear about people saying like, oh, I'm an ENFP or whatever. So complete that one, because what I'm going to have you guys do is before class tomorrow, I want you to post on our class Google Doc which type you are. So I have all the types listed, and you'll just put your name under, so you can kind of see where our class falls in terms of the 16 different types of personalities that he posits. And then you can read Mod 59. And then finally, we got our Unit 6 FRQ on Friday. So have a lovely day, you guys. Let me know if you have any questions, and keep up the good work. All right. So what you're doing now for our little DIY Rorschach inkblot, what I'd like you guys to do, step 1, you're going to get a sheet of paper out. It could be a notebook paper, right? That's what I got, so it doesn't matter. You're going to fold it in half. And what would that be? That would be like the, is that the hamburger style, I think it is? I don't know. Whatever they taught us in elementary school. So fold it in half. And then on one side, you're going to take your paint or whatever material you want to use. I know we are at home, so we might not have all the resources. So you're going to take that, whether it's nail polish, or you could use like ketchup or whatever you want to do. Or if you have paint, go for it. So use your materials. I'm like the little off-brand Martha Stewart here. You can use that, put it on the one side, and then splatter it around. And then you're going to close it, smush it together, and then open it back up, and then that creates your ink blot. So once you do that, take a picture. You're going to post it and put it on our class Google Doc. And then what you guys are going to do is comment below a school-appropriate image that you see from it. So do you see like a butterfly? Is it a bat? Is it a woman? Like, what do you see from it? So you can go ahead, do that. Shouldn't be too bad. Get yourself some creativity in for the day. All right. Rock on, you guys.